The reason I'm speaking tonight is because I want to draw the attention of both the Australian Parliament and the Australian people to the escalating human rights abuses and deteriorating political situation in Venezuela. I've had a number of representations from Venezuelan Australian community on this issue, and I'd like to make a call-out, a shout-out tonight to my sister, Kerry, who originally brought this situation to my attention. And I asked questions during the recent Senate estimates to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Now, they started by telling me that there are nearly 4,000 Venezuelan Australians currently living in Australia. My research suggests that that is a significant underestimate. DFET then went on to tell me that there's been quite a long-running process of escalating civil unrest and difficulties in Venezuela. That in November 2016, Australia expressed concern during the UN Human Rights Council Universal Periodic Review process about the deteriorating situation, and that in September 2016 we joined 28 nations in making a joint statement on Venezuela at the Human Rights Council. And in October 2016, our then ambassador to Venezuela made representations directly to the Venezuelan Ministry of Foreign Affairs outlining those concerns, and officials here have reiterated our concerns directly with the Venezuelan embassy here. I understand that the Venezuelan community here would like us to increase our representation on this dire situation. There is currently a petition circulating among the community, calling on the Australian Parliament to speak out and to raise the issue among the Australian and international community, and to provide aid in the form of food and medicine, and it lists other things including reopening consular assistance to Venezuela. Let me talk plainly. The situation in Venezuela right now is a disaster. There are food and medicine shortages. There is hyperinflation, which has made it impossible for people to afford food, even when it's available. Crime has escalated to levels that here in Australia we couldn't possibly imagine. And I perhaps draw listeners' attention to a recent Four Corners episode that they can download off ABC iView on this exact situation. Now, some of this situation stems from a sudden drop in the oil price, but much of the trauma appears to come from an increasingly anti-democratic and corrupted government under President Nicolas Maduro. It is hard for Australians to understand the turmoil that is going on right now in Venezuela. Here are some of the things that Amnesty International have documented. The government continue to use excessive force against protesters and political opponents. My understanding is that in 80 days of protest, over 75 people have now been killed. There are spates of arbitrary arrests and jailing of political opponents and critics. Political opponents are being accused of unfounded crimes and placed before military rather than civil courts. Police and security forces may have carried out extrajudicial killings. The National Intelligence Service are arresting critics for crimes against the homeland. They often target politicians and also journalists. This has occurred to opposition leaders and editors of major newspapers. At the heart of this is a President Nicolas Maduro, seemingly doing anything he can to cling on to power. Despite losing a parliamentary election, despite attempts by the opposition to initiate a recall of the President, I understand the President has used what is in effect his own Supreme Court to overrule these democratic actions. This stemmed from what was called the mother of all marches on the 19th of April this year. Millions marched that day, and there have been running protests ever since that day. The President has responded by expanding the national militia to 500,000 people, all armed with a rifle. It is also my understanding that the protesters are democratic and peaceful, but are met with force and violence from the government. I would like to recognise the courage of the many Venezuelans who are facing this anti-democratic regime with such dignity and strength. And I hope that the Australian government will continue to advocate for the international community to apply pressure. I also hope we can work with NGOs to provide aid in the form of food and medicine.